Well, thank you, Paige, and to our audience, hello and welcome. Well, we often prepare reserve study content in these webinars to help you understand what that document is and what it contains, how we put it together, and to help you become a little more informed about what this document is and how it can help your association. But today we're focusing on you, the decision maker. All we're doing today is to respond to the questions you've posed about how do I move forward? And so often those questions are full of, well, what about this? And my homeowners are saying this, and these are the issues we're having at our association. And so we see our job at Association Reserves to set you up for a safe and secure future. And that means guiding you through these confusing issues to help you make wise decisions. And to do that, we've enlisted the help of some outside expertise today. You've heard Julie Adman is going to join us on the program. And together we're going to try to, again, help set you up for success at your association with the obstacles, or today we're calling them the quicksand, that's going to suck you in, distract you, and take your time and get you off track. Well, if this is your first webinar with us, we welcome you. And we're here every month to provide some tips and techniques to help you have more success in that hard work you do leading your associations forward, whether it's as a manager or a board member. And this is the outline we're going to use today, guiding you through first an introduction, then how to identify quicksand. What is it that we're talking about? Getting out of quicksand, and then being wise, just avoiding it in the first place. And then I'll bring it all together in a summary. So quicksand starts with an idea that we are on a journey to the future. It's a path that we're on. We don't have any say in the matter. I use the words Mother Nature and Father Time, but these are these issues going on that everything that we live in, the world is spinning every day. Once a year we go around the sun, everything gets older, nothing we can do about that. And everything is in a continual state of deterioration. And because of that, there's nothing you can do to stop that deterioration. All you can do is mount a good defense. So that's why we're here today. Those big expenses are lurking. They're the monsters. They're the quicksand, and they're going to easily scare you off the trail if you don't know what you're focusing on, what your objectives are. So the future's coming. The board has the job of leading the association safely to the future. The manager is hopefully a wise counselor or a coach standing alongside. And the question is, will the choices you make get your association safely to the future, or will you get stuck along the way? The end objective that we talk about, and we'll use a little bit of the Wizard of Oz illustrations or imagery in today's program, is what's the goal? What's at the end of this path that we're on? Well, it's having sufficient reserves to perform projects on time, which means no deferred maintenance. You're not waiting too long, and you're not having to gather up a lot of cash at the last minute. So you are basically, can summarize this in saying that you are ready. The association is financially prepared, physically prepared, politically prepared to get projects done. And when you do that, you have maximized property values. There's owner enjoyment. A lot of good things happen. You don't have the extra stress at board meetings about where's this money going to come from, because a little bit each month, you've budgeted for it. You know where you're going. You know that you're on track. You know when you'll be doing projects. It's amazing when things go smoothly. So that's what we're going to try to accomplish here today, is walk you through what the quicksand is, getting you out of it, avoiding it, and then bringing it home. So we are now at the second part here. I'm going to turn the microphone over to Julie, and she's going to spend a few minutes talking about what quicksand looks like at your association.
Well, quicksand can look like some big mushy thing that you shouldn't get your feet in, number one. But what we're going to do is we're going to identify the types of quicksand. So I'm just going to go over these quickly. So hoarding reserves, meaning not spending any, just using it like, we never take money out. Conversely, depleting reserves, using reserves for maybe items that are they're not supposed to be used for, such as a capital improvement or something to that effect, or operational expenses. Not collecting and preparing, so not collecting enough in assessments and preparing your community for the future. My favorite, and I'm sure all you board members' favorite, apathy, and maybe not necessarily on the board, but maybe on the homeowner's part. And then there's unsure of when to spend the reserves. We just don't know when we should be spending that. Next is fixating, and last on a percent funded. It wasn't the last, on a percent funded. In other words, oh my goodness, I'm way down in the weeds. We're only at 68% funded. We should be at 75% funded. Just don't get the weeds. And lastly, indecision. Of course, indecision is a decision, but that's our last one. So first, let's talk about hoarding reserves. Now, this is commonly recognized by these phrases. And if you are board members, I'm sure you've heard them. And if you're sitting with other board members, don't look at the person who said it. This is what you often hear. And homeowners, you may have heard it too at a board meeting. But we can't spend that. Meaning, well, we just can't spend it, but that money's for savings and we have to do it. And well, that dovetails right there. Those are our savings. We can't spend it. The next one is, aren't we already underfunded? I mean, we don't have enough money as it is. Maybe we shouldn't spend it all. And then again, everything's so expensive, which no kidding, folks, everything is expensive. I told the last webinar folks that I was at Costco yesterday and I went to purchase, I don't think it's quite a pound. I think it's probably a half a pound of piñons, right, to cook with. And I think the last time I bought that, couldn't have been that long ago, maybe a year and a half ago, because I put them in the freezer. Anyway, it was about $12.99. It's $29.99 now. So yes, everything is so expensive, but that shouldn't stop you from spending your reserves appropriately.
When it's time to do something, you need to do something.
That's right. Exactly. You can't just pretend it's not happening. Okay. And then there is depleting reserves. So you will again recognize these phrases, but we've got the money. Let's just spend it it's on things that maybe we shouldn't be spending it on. Or how about this one? The future is not my problem. Boy, that is something I've heard innumerable times in my 35 years in this business, where the future's not my problem. Well, I think if those of you who had been paying attention a couple of years ago to the disaster that happened at Champlain Towers in Florida, where the building collapsed, the future evidently wasn't their problem, but the people in the future, it very much was their problem. And there was loss of life and loss of finances. Loss of life, of course, being the worst. So the future, as a current board member, actually is your problem. And the last one, there isn't enough money in the operating fund, so let's transfer money out of reserves for operating. This is a big quicksand. If your association is doing this on a regular basis, and yes, many do, you are in quicksand.
Julie, you had me taking notes there, and I was not advancing the slides.
Oh, operator error.
Yeah.
Okay. And then another quicksand identifier is not collecting enough or preparing for the future. So these types of issues are recognized by the following. But we can't afford an increase in assessments. What? Everything goes up every year, folks. And I know it seems like you should be able to hold the line on assessments, but they have to reflect the reality of the economy at any one time and the reality of the condition of your association. And here's the other one. Well, I'm only on the board for this year. That dovetails with the previous one, as the future's not my problem. So if you're only on the board for this year and you don't care, well, maybe you shouldn't be on the board, because someone has to care about this and you have a duty to do so. And then, of course, the next one, why should I pay for someone else's roof? Now, this is really common in, say, condominium buildings. So let's say you live in a condo complex and they're all duplexes. So you live in one duplex, you have a next door neighbor, and there's several other duplexes. Well, the roofs are failing on 4 or 5 of those duplexes, but they're not yours. Well, the way condominiums are set, yes, it is your problem, because the association, the corporation, is responsible for maintaining that building envelope, if you will. They are responsible for that. So just as if it was your roof. And when it is your roof, believe me, you're not going to want those other people to say, why should I pay for your roof? And then, of course, the last one, but the homeowners don't want to. And boy, I get that. It is a tough place to be as a board member. I really empathize. I've just finished sitting on 2 boards myself. I don't know what I was thinking, but I did. And, you know, it's why it's so difficult. And let me just put a fine point on this for all of you board members, is because when you are dealing with people's, as a board member, finances and their living arrangements. Those are very, very personal items. So people have a tendency to get emotional about it. And you may be getting emotional about it too. But that's why it's so difficult. And you're legislating your neighbors. I mean, all of you as board members know that you've had a friend at some point who stopped being your friend once you got on the board. And it's the saddest thing I've ever seen. But I'll tell you what, we appreciate you, and you're probably doing what is right. One of our other favorite on the hit parade is apathy. This is commonly recognized by board members or even owners saying, but isn't that someone else's problem? The answer is no, it's not. It's your problem as an association, as a board member, as a homeowner as well. And, at a board meeting, don't we have more important things to discuss than funding reserves? Because we can just put that off and, the condo cops aren't going to come get us. That's apathy. We just don't care how it's going. And then, of course, our last one, nobody else funds reserves. That is not true. They do fund reserves. And associations that are well-funded in reserves enjoy typically a much happier populace and better resale value. I think, Robert, you have a stat on that, don't you?
Right. We've got an article on that, actually a number of articles on it. It's a big deal, and that can be a good transition to where we go next. But basically, when you are funding reserves, well, you look at this place, Aspen Creek, on the slide that you're seeing. That's a worn and tired association. Why would anyone want to pay top dollar to live in this place? And just the idea that for $5,000, you can get a nice, fresh front sign, increase the things that make improve curb appeal. And that can increase the property value for every one of the 50 or 100 or 250 homeowners there. And the reserves that you spend on the association has incredible payback for all the different owners. So we can go down that path. But let me just address the next couple of slides. We want you to, again, this is all about your decision points. We don't want you to ever be uncertain. And for those of you who don't touch reserves very often or the subject of reserves, it can look kind of foreign and complicated. And this is when you come down the path and you say, well, I don't know what to do. Is this a reserve or an operating expense? Julie already cautioned you, don't be spending your reserves on operational type things. And yes, you want to use reserves for reserve projects. And then the concern that, well, it doesn't match what it says in the reserve study. What do I do? Or it isn't in the reserve study. Can we spend it if it's a big project, but it's not even there? Again, we don't want you to be stuck in this. We'll have some solutions in the next session of the webinar here, but we want to get you familiar with what are some of these quicksand type of things. And related to that is, when do we spend it? Well, there's a national 3-part test, National Reserve Study Standards 3-part test for when to spend reserves is when it's the association's obligation. We're not talking about management company. We're not talking about individual homeowner. The association responsible for it. You can reasonably anticipate it, which is, we're in the budgeting business here. We're talking about budgeting. You can see it coming and you can prepare for it, and it's a significant cost. So those 3 things put together, and that's going to be when you want to spend your reserve funds on taking good care of the property. Again, more on that later in the program. One thing Julie talked about earlier, fixating on the trivia, the minutia. We don't want you focusing on a particular number. That's just a benchmark along the way. That's a measuring point. We want you focusing on taking care of the property. What does this property need? Where does it need repairs? Where does it need a replacement? What do we need to do to maximize home values? Because we don't want you wondering, well, if we spend the money, that'll drop our percent funded. Or crazier, if we eliminate that component, putting it on the individual homeowner's responsibility, that'll increase our percent funded. Haven't we done a good thing? Well, no. Quickly, because that project still needs to get done, and it's going to be more expensive to each owner if they have to hire someone themselves rather than getting it done in economies of scale. Or someone who ran with a promise. I ran with a promise to increase our percent funded, or I ran with a promise to not raise our homeowner assessments this year. These are crazy things. These are the kind of things that are going to get you stuck. And so we want to be real careful as we're talking about these things to make sure you can see where your exposure is with your association, so you can start to get a sense of where can we improve and how can we move forward a little bit better. Julie?
Well, going back to identifying our quicksand, here's one that's really, really common in community associations is indecision, which is often recognized by these types of statements, but we could be wrong. So that means if you're saying we could be wrong, what that would indicate to me as a management professional is you don't have enough information. And we're going to talk about this as we go further, but information is truly at your fingertips if you just know where to look. And that's what we're here to do. Robert and I are here to do, but there are other places as well. So we'll go through that. So that's an information issue. The next one is the expert as board member. Well, it looks just fine to me. Well, the street may look fine right now, but your asphalt professional and your reserve professional may think, well, this is only going to deal with one more flood or one more earthquake or whatever. Or let's just talk about living in, say, Utah, where it freezes and heats up and freezes and heats up, and you have to replace that kind of thing with alarming regularity. So it may look fine to you, but you, bless you, are not the expert. And then, of course, here's the other one is let's discuss that next month. The old let's table it so we can just ignore it for the coming months. Well, you can. I don't recommend it, but you can. You know, Robert, what I always tell boards, and I tell managers this too, is that, you know, as a board, you can decide to paint the trees purple and plant them upside down. Now, we don't recommend that. We don't recommend it, but we can certainly expedite it. But when we don't recommend it, that goes to file and probably in the minutes. So your management professional should always be bringing that type of thing to your attention. And then, of course, let's let the next board decide. So I alluded to this in the last one, didn't allude to it, I actually spoke about it, is that does everyone remember playing musical chairs when you were a kid? I loved that game.
Yep.
I loved that game. Yep. It was so fun. Well, if the project is only 5, maybe 10 years old, you're walking around in the circle and you're never going to lose a chair. But you start getting to the 20, 30, and 40-year mark, which many, many, many of our communities are now hitting. And if reserves have not been properly funded and the money's appropriately spent in maintaining those major common elements, that board at 30 years or 35 years they're the person left without a chair. And there's no better example of that than the board at Champlain Towers. That association had never funded reserves, which was legal at the time in Florida, because the homeowners could vote it down, and they did. They never wanted to. And they always thought, well, I'm not going to be here in 10 years. Oh, my kids are going to own it. I'm going to be dead. And that last board was the one who had to deal with the devastating aftermath of a major collapse. And the entire place had to be raised. So that is that board. If you ever read any of the documents, they're heartbreaking, but that board was courageous. Would you agree, Robert?
Absolutely. There was a lot of years of doing a lot of nothing. The last board was trying. They were raising the special assessments. They got the engineering report. They hired a reserve study firm to bring some order to the situation. They were trying, and they just ran out of time. So they didn't have a place to sit after that, nor did they have a home, and many people lost their lives. I know it sounds dramatic, but for us in our industry, Champlain Towers is the poster child for kicking the can down the road with regard to reserves. What we want to impress upon all of you board members, and I know it's difficult because as boards rotate, so you may end up with 2 new members this year and 3 new members next year. So I do empathize with how difficult it is to keep on track. That's why good written policies are always a good thing, and everyone should get them when they become board members. Stay on track with your reserve funding and with all your other policies that you've put in place. And remember what success looks like. Look, success looks like you're going down the yellow brick road and there's the gorgeous Emerald City on the other end. Reaching the Emerald City is the success. And you want sufficient reserves to perform projects on time for no deferred maintenance or special assessments. 2 things. Deferred maintenance is, again, one of the most, it's really sad because what a lot of boards don't realize is that when an association is well maintained, and let's just use the guard shack for something to say,
and it looks really shabby, it looks very old, the paint is peeling and things are falling off, and it needs a complete refurbishment. We maybe need to replace the roof, all of those type of things, and we can't do it because we don't have sufficient reserves. Well, when people are driving into your project, I mean, forget the people who don't live there, the people that live there, it brings them down. It makes them feel shabby. And I'm not trying to get all woo-woo here, but it has an effect on people. So when things are well-managed, well-run, there's no deferred maintenance, and when something needs to be replaced, it gets replaced. When something needs to be repaired, it gets repaired. There is no diddling around with that time-wise, and it makes your owners happier. I absolutely guarantee you, one of the last boards I just sat on, that place did that. They fixed everything as it needed to be fixed. The place was gorgeous. It had fantastic resale values, and it wasn't like this super upscale place. It was probably middle class to upper middle class, but the boards over the years had just taken care of that business. So no special assessments ever, and no deferred maintenance. They take care of it. And again, let me just emphasize this. It maximizes your property values. Those homes in that particular community sell for an unbelievable amount of money for what they are. They're nice, but it's shocking the amount of money they sell for, which worked for me, by the way. But it was mostly because of years and years, actually it's all because of years and years of boards that took care of business like that. Not necessarily the one I sat on, but years before that.
Yeah, it's all the decisions that the boards can make over the years. Well, let's turn the page and talk about those kind of decisions. What can you do? If you're in quicksand, what can you do to get out of quicksand? I'm going to hand it back to you, Julie, about getting out of quicksand.
Well, get help. There's nothing shameful in saying, I don't know anything about this, because after all, folks, this isn't your business. Robert and I live and breathe this entire industry. So to us, it's like falling off a log, but you as a volunteer don't have that depth and 30 plus years of resources at your hand. So it's okay to say, I need help with this. Probably the best thing you can have overall is an experienced manager, whether they're an on-site manager or portfolio manager, an experienced manager, one that's got 5 or 6 more years or more years under their belt now, before everybody says, I've had 5 managers in the last 5 years. Yes, that does happen. The employment market is very difficult for all industries, including ours. Ours is a very difficult business to be in, as all you board members know. But if you have a newer manager, pick up the phone, call the management company, and ask to speak to a vice president or a district manager, the person over and above your manager, if you feel like the manager does not have that experience. And they may very well not. I mean, that can just be the truth. So your management company will have a resource for you there. And then, you need a credentialed reserve study professional. And this isn't someone doing it out of the back of their car, with an Excel spreadsheet. You need someone who knows the business, who knows associations, knows how they need to operate and how quickly they need to turn around the reports. And there's a whole thing on that, Robert. Sorry about that. Didn't mean to bring that one up.
Okay.
And they know what they're doing, like association reserves. I mean, shameless plug, but they do. I mean, I've known Robert for, I don't know, Robert, how many years? 25?
Plenty.
Yeah. Wait.
We're dating
yes, I should.
ourselves.
We're not old. We're classic.
Yeah.
So anyway, those are the two things. They start with your manager and your reserved study professional. Now, let's talk about the business judgment rule. Now, the business judgment rule allows board members to rely on the expertise of others. So once again, it looks okay to me. Well, you don't know about it. You're not an asphalt expert. You have to rely on the expert, whether it's the asphalt contractor or whether it's the reserve study professional or in some fashion your manager. But here's what you do have in conjunction with that. You as board members, as fiduciaries, as trustees of the corporation, you have a duty of care. That means you are focused on the overall big picture management and health, meaning financial and physical health of that community. Next, you have a duty of loyalty to that community. You don't have a duty of loyalty to your own pocketbook. I don't want to raise assessments because I can't afford it, or to the next door neighbors who will have to move if you raise assessments. As heartbreaking as that is, it's just true. And a duty of loyalty not to your friend's brother-in-law who runs a landscape company. The duty of loyalty is to the community as a whole. as a whole, and to use professional input at all times. Last is the duty of inquiry. That means you must always have a curious mind. In other words, if you're thinking, well, I can get away from thinking about this right now, or let's just table it till next month, you're not fulfilling that duty of inquiry. It is your fiduciary duty to inquire, get information, and find out what to do financially for your reserves. So as it says here, get fresh information in an updated reserve study. And then again, talk with your professionals.
Yeah, I want to follow up on that. When you're wondering what you're going to get in a reserve study, you're going to get a window into the future because your reserve study professional has the ability to regularly see the telltales of things getting old. So you may see the normal, I want to say little things at your association that happen from year to year to year, but your reserve study professional can help you see the big expense that's going to come between 5 and 10 years out. Or it may be a different association where the big expense is really close and you realize, wow, we don't have much time to prepare for that. Or it may be a different profile where you have scattered big expenses through the years. These are all different profiles that your reserve professional can say, okay, this is what your unique situation of your association is. These are the expenses that just plain happen because of which assets you have, and then the age that you're at as an association, how you've cared for them. These are the kind of expenses that you're going to face in your future. And so we need to prepare for them. Or it could be something like this, where you have a couple of large expenses, maybe 10 years out, maybe another 20 years after that, but a lot of different things. And this is what you learn in your reserve study. What is out there in the future? So to get out of quicksand, you need to know what your obstacles are. What are your challenges? And when you come up to a fork in the road and you're wondering, okay, what do we do here? Your reserve study is going to help. It's going to be a little bit like the scarecrow saying it's better to go this way. So learn what your unique path to the future looks like. And part of that you're going to learn from your manager, as Julie said, or your reserve study expert. Reach out because they're on your side. We're doing a webinar here today. It costs you nothing. We serve clients all the time, and it's going to help them have more success, and we can point them in the right direction. And we want to give you the tools for success.
Now let's talk a little bit about back to the duty of loyalty. So what does that really mean? That means that you must take action. So you are loyal to the community. You're not loyal to your own pocketbook. You're not loyal to other homeowners' pocketbooks, or even swayed a lot by the politics surrounding what you need to do. So that means you need to take action. You can't just keep tabling it. You must take action for the betterment of the community. And what does that mean in practical terms, everybody? That means adjust your budget and make those transfers into your reserve study. So if you have to raise assessments, you have to raise assessments. If you don't have to raise assessments, you don't, but maybe you're not making those reserve study transfers like you should, your reserve transfers like you should. But this is what it means. That is the duty of loyalty to the community as a whole.
And we don't want to have you think that it's going to be just a tragic situation where it's going to upend the entire budget. When we're preparing reserve studies, we understand the limited powers that boards have. You have limited budgets, you have limited political capital, how much you can talk the homeowners through, how much you can draw them forward. So getting out of quicksand doesn't have to be done all at once. Typically, we see associations having taken years or decades to get themselves into a jam. And in most cases, slow and smooth is the way to get out of that situation. So don't worry that it's going to be a crisis for your association. It may be some wake-up news, but the way to get out is always just one step at a time.
That's right.
Well, let me turn the corner to another element of our webinar here. We're going to talk about wisdom. Wisdom is avoiding quicksand in the first place. And how can you do that? Well, part of it is appreciating that everything is deteriorating, and so you need to act like you care about sustainability of the association. So everything's deteriorating, so make the reserve funding that offsets that deterioration. That way you're not in a hole. And the way to find out how much that's going to cost you as far as reserve transfers, rely on your trusted guides. No guessing here. Coming back to things we've already said, rely on your experienced manager, rely on your reserve study professional, ask questions. What do I do? Get an updated reserve study. It's really not an advanced concept here. And when I say get fresh information, when we say get fresh information, best practices in the reserve study industry have been updated since Champlain Tower South, since we learned those kind of lessons. And best practice at this point in time is to get a reserve study update based on a diligent visual on-site inspection at least every third year. That's how you're going to get fresh, good, wise counsel.
And we can't emphasize this part enough. You do have resources at hand. First, reach out to your manager or your reserve study professional with whatever questions you have over any period of time. Again, you don't have to know everything, and you should know everything. It's not your discipline, but you do have resources of which to reach out to. Now, if you don't have a manager, again, reserve study professional. If you're self-managed, reserve study professional. That's the person who will answer your questions for you.
Fantastic. Thank you, Julie. Okay, well, let's summarize what we've talked about today and bring this webinar to a close. I want to make sure you're all very aware that the quicksand is out there. It's not just your association. Every association is going to have its set of problems, and you are on the journey to the future. You don't have a choice about it. You can't just press pause and come back later, because every day the weather moves on, the sun cooks your roof. There's all these things that you just don't have a choice about. And as we've said so many times, you're not on your own. You're not having to struggle. You can reach out to managers, to online resources, to reserve study professionals. There are people you can go to for help. And there's landmarks along the way, so you can chart your progress. Your reserves percent funded is one of those things where you can say, are we making progress? How are we doing? So what we want to leave you with is just encouragement to keep your eyes open, look around, ask those questions, follow your guides, and you will be just fine. The associations that are making the news are the minority of associations out there. There's many associations that are underfunded, but they are moving forward, and they're moving forward with assistance, knowing what to do and how to do it, gradually strengthening their situation. So you can get successfully to the future. Again, if you're just keeping your eyes open, looking around, asking the right questions, following those that guidance that you get, and you will be just fine as you go into the future. So, Julie, can you tell us a little bit about where they can reach you and what other resources you have to offer?
Sure. Thanks, Robert, and thanks, Paige, for hosting this once again for us all. You all can go to my website, adamand-inc.com. It's up there, or you can just Google me. I have many resources, many years worth of articles up there. Many are manager-oriented, but many are board-oriented. In fact, I will tell you the last 2 months of my publication, the HOA Manager Newsline, which you'll find on the website, were the board member job description, soft skills and hard skills. So you all may have, that was actually because someone asked me about that. Is there such a thing as a board member job description? I thought, no, I guess I'll have to do that.
Yeah.
So did that. So I also do all kinds of consulting, expert witness work. I also recruit managers for large scale associations and high rises, and basically any on-site position. So I do that as well, typically for in-house on-site communities. And lastly, I've been doing this for so long, people, I forget what I do. The last thing I have is a CAM, Community Association Management 101 for board members. You'll also find that on my website. Just click on the Education tab. Also have CAM 101 for managers. The CAM 101 for managers are good for 6 CE credits with CAM ECB. So if you're a CMCA, you can use them. Also, they're good if you're an AMS for continuing ed. And as also, if you're a Florida manager, they are good for continuing ed credits with the Florida Department of Business and Professional Regulations. But if anyone feels like reaching out to me, I'm usually here all the time. I can certainly help.
Yeah, and for free, high recommendation to her Manager Newsline newsletter that comes out. I read it. It's good stuff, very informative. And boy, as a board member or as a manager, stacking free resources to your advantage is just wisdom. Okay, for association reserves, we have a deep library of resources on our website. Again, www.reservestudy.com to set you up for success. If you need a proposal for a reserve study, you can click a link at the top right of our website. If you want to get added to our email list so you get notification of webinars like this, scroll to the bottom of any page and you can get added to that email list and get the notification that will, again, the helpful free resources. Here's another free one. We created a book, Understanding Reserves. You can download chapter 1 for free from our website. See if you like it. See if it's going to be the right kind of thing for your association. If you like it, order the book off Amazon. It's just a nice, good, inexpensive resource for you and your association, guiding you through those decision points. And another thing that guides you through decision points is our online reserve calculator called UPlanet. It literally makes your reserve study come alive. You can touch the numbers, play around with the numbers, see what happens when that happens, basically find out what the quicksand is. We have clients saying, oh, I tried that and I realized we'll run out of money in 7 years if we do that. And that's fantastic to learn. It's like a online flight simulator program. You get to play with the future of your association. Anyway, great little tool. Comes free access with every completed reserve study for the rest of your budget season for that year. And of course, more resources on YouTube. You can go to our channel, subscribe. This webinar will be posted to YouTube in about a week, as well as so many other reserve study and related field resources. And finally, I want to put in a big plug for our weekly podcast. It's called HOA Insights, Common Sense for Common Areas. It's primarily designed for board members. It's there to encourage and equip board members with a little more information every week, 30 minutes a week. New episodes drop every Monday, again, to help you in the hard work you do running your association, bringing it to the future. You can subscribe from all major podcast platforms. You can listen from www.hoainsights.org. Or again, you can find us on YouTube, but a great free resource. And that brings us to the end of today's program. And I'll turn the microphone over to Paige, who will coordinate our Q&A time together.